Welcome to the final lesson of this section or this unit titled Logos. Okay, so we are looking at chapter 4, arguments based on fact and reasons, Logos. Okay, Logos, I guess is a pronunciation. I guess I'm messing them all up. Okay, thinking about what Lunsford says here, I want to think about this idea of a post-fact world. This is really relevant to me at this day and age, and hopefully it is for you as well. But I feel we're living in an era of fake news, right? And you hear this from both sides now, okay? There's critique on mass media, news outlets, but the idea of what Lunsford is saying here about living in a post-fact world, right, is really interesting, okay? And what they ask here, it feels like, Lunsford says specifically, it feels like facts are under siege, okay? And that's interesting, right? We see this picture of Kellyanne Conway. If you don't know who that is the, I don't know if she still works for Trump. I think she does, right? Press secretary, I guess you would call her. That's, yeah. But she was credited with saying a specific term that I think she'll be notorious for down the road, and that's this idea of alternative facts, right? How can you in a world have something called alternative facts? There are just facts to an argument, right? So I want us to think about this idea here, okay? Thinking about why it's so important to have arguments based on facts and reason, okay? I think especially in our day and age, this is super important, okay? And I wrote here, do you even fact check, bro, or sis, right? Like that's what we think about, right? Do you even fact check some of these things we see, okay? I want to get into this specific idea here on page 59 called confirmation or my side bias, okay? Let's go to the middle of 59. Scientists working on this issue point to the confirmation or my side bias, the strong tendency to accept information that supports our beliefs and values and to reject information that opposes them, as well as to our tendency to think we know a whole lot more than we actually do. This happens on both sides of the political spectrum, wherever you argue, right? I'm a victim of this myself. I feel that this is really relevant in our social media day and time, our era. This my side bias. You think of the way algorithms are configured for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, right? We kind of get in what I call like this social media bubble. Maybe I didn't start that, but that's really what it seems like, right? It's an echo chamber, if you will. And if you keep hearing the same confirmation bias, hey, I told you this was it, right? Because you follow certain areas and Facebook funnels you, or any social media app funnels you to this idea, that is an attack on critical thinking in essence, okay? But becoming critical thinkers, you can understand like, oh, okay, maybe I am too inundated with my side of the argument, right? And I struggle with this as well in my own life. So this is something that I think Lunsford is touching on pretty succinctly here, okay? And I love how this ending of this paragraph right before the last, a quote by Sloman and Fernbach, as a rule, strong feelings about issues do not emerge from deep understanding, okay? This is how a community of knowledge can become dangerous, okay? So be careful. You feel like you may be informed. You feel like you're understanding a topic at length. If you're in a community of knowledge that is a bubble and doesn't give you multiple perspectives, that can become dangerous, okay? And that's where confirmation or my side bias is really key. And I think that's important. I'm not just trying to, give you a life lesson or anything, right? But I think it's really important when you think about facts and reason, okay? Be careful that you're engaging multiple facts, even if it's a topic that you don't really relate to or agree with. At least engage multiple perspectives to understand why you don't, and also have ammunition to then combat that or kind of debate it, okay? Let's move ahead here, page 60, thinking critically about hard evidence. I really like this idea here. You can use these terms, and obviously these last lessons have been because I want you to engage the reading. And I want you to adopt this type of term. So when you talk about pathos, ethos, logos, I want you to use these freely in your writing because this is what your first essay is going to be about. But I also want you to incorporate these other ideas of these appeals, right? Whether it's an emotional appeal, whether it's an ethical appeal, whether it is a logical appeal, which is what we're on now, okay? Specifically, the terminology that we're looking at here in the middle here, thinking critically about hard evidence, is Aristotle's, the way Aristotle classifies arguments by distinguishing two kinds, okay? We see that there are two kinds of proofs. One is artistic, the second is inartistic. Artistic proofs are arguments the writer-speaker creates, constructed arguments, and they are appeals to reason, common sense. Inartistic proofs are arguments the writer-speaker is given, hard evidence, and facts, statistics, testimonies, witnesses, contracts, documents, okay? I'm not going to read the whole passage by Jeff Sessions, okay? But I like what they do here because, right, we can then dissect and understand, and I want you to do this with some of the things that we read. You can, and everything you read, really, when you're thinking about logos and facts and reason. Jeff Sessions is starting this diatribe or this passage, right, his statement, excuse me, where he is talking about rescinding DACA, right? He gives a number of information, right? We see here, and I'm in the bottom, right under that picture on 61, okay, he uses inartistic evidence of what DACA provided, parentheses, it was renewable and provided work, authorization, and other benefits for, quote, 800,000 mostly adult illegal aliens. Noting that Congress had refused on several occasions to extend benefits to the same group of illegal aliens, Sessions offers a constructed argument, and we're going to touch more on this in a minute, that Obama's open-ended circumvention of immigration laws was an unconstitutional exercise of authority, okay? Presumably, now drawing on hard evidence, Sessions argues that DACA led to a surge of unaccompanied minors, that it denied jobs to hundreds of thousands of Americans, and by neglecting the rule of law, subjected the United States to the risk of crime, violence, and even terrorism. Okay, so Sessions says early on in his statement that DACA was implemented amidst great controversy, and indeed that fact checks out, right? That's not too debatable. It was amid great controversy. Other claims made in the statement, however, were quickly challenged. The nonpartisan factcheck.org, for example, calls out Sessions' description of DACA recipients as mostly adult illegal aliens, a label he uses several times, okay? Citing research by Professor Tong Wong at the University of California, San Diego, whose national survey of 3,063 DACA holders in summer 2017 found that on average they were 6.5 years old when they arrived in the U.S., most of them. 54% were under the age of 7. That dispels Sessions' claim. So while they are adults today, they were not adults when they were brought to the United States. Okay, likewise, factcheck.org points out that Sessions' claim that DACA contributed to a surge of unaccompanied minors is at best misleading and out of context. Okay, you can read that in the middle of page 62. But what I'm saying here, no matter your stance on DACA, whether you're for or against, you can see how Sessions is, once he is fact-checked, that is incorrect what he's claiming, right? Logically, he is unsound because the facts and reason of facts specifically have different, there's a different outcome there. So Sessions is incorrect, right? And like I said, whether your stance on DACA is one way or the other, we can understand the way he obviously, for this administration, they meant to rescind DACA to make it, that's for the deferred action, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, right? If not to jump ahead, but you've got that from the reading. But we can understand how he logically is unsound in these arguments, okay? And then I want you to then think about how, and this is something that I want you to read on your own, this specific section, how Sessions here is being artistic, right? Which arguments of his are artistic proofs, which of his are inartistic proofs. Okay, really key. And once you start doing that, I think that's when you can start becoming more of a logical, critical thinker in understanding this. Okay, let's move ahead here, and I think that's a really good, way of testing logos, right? Let's move ahead to the bottom of 63. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster here, right? Facts. We can go all the way to page 64. Okay. And like I said, I want you to read this on your own. What facts are, it's kind of been repeated, right? But gathering factual information and transmitting it faithfully practically define what we mean by professional journalism and scholarship. That's in it in a nutshell, okay? You can go through these examples. I want to read something specifically here, right? When you think about I think it's Hui Zhu, Grace Chow, PhD, she's there happier, having better lives than I am, right? You can read that, the impact of using Facebook on perceptions of others' lives. There are no fireworks in this conclusion, no slanted or hot language, no unfair or selective reporting of data, just a careful attention to the facts and behaviors uncovered by the study, okay? But one can easily imagine these facts being subsequently used to support over-dramatized claims about the dangers of social networks. That's often what happens to scholarly studies when they are read and interpreted in the popular media. Okay, of course, arguing with facts can involve challenging even the most reputable sources if they lead to unfair or selective reporting, or if the stories are presented or framed unfairly. So the fact is, no pun intended, but when people use facts, you also have to question how they are framed, how the evidence presented to you. I recently saw a video, maybe I can find it if I can, I'll try to post it, where Bernie Sanders, a reporter, forget his name, maybe Dave Sirota or something to that effect, tried to give him information about polling, and Bernie Sanders had the receipts in his hand. He had the letter, and the results, and he said, no, take a look here, right? Can I do my Bernie impression? Oh, take a look here, I have it, right? So he's, what was he saying here? No, your logos is jacked up. Don't come at me if you don't have the information correct. I have the updated version here, right? You are unsound with that, okay? So he, was like, and then all these ways of manipulating facts and information, it's really important. I will bring up a lot of the Democratic debates and how the polls are, because I think, and I'm really kind of being keen on this, because I have my specific candidate who I like. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. But I feel like information is skewed a lot, right? And and then that happens in for the Republican Party, Democratic Party, etc. So I think it's a really prime time to think about how this information is presented to you, and then how you as a critical thinker then challenge that information. Okay, test the logos, the logical assumptions that's presented to you, right? It goes back to credibility. Okay, we're going to go through this a little bit quickly. I don't want to just do the facts. Stats is another important, right? You probably heard the old saying, I'm at the bottom of 64. There are three kinds of lies, damn lies, and statistics, and it is certainly possible to lie with numbers, most definitely, right? Even those that are accurate, because numbers rarely speak for themselves, okay? They need to be interpreted by writers, and this is the key there. Numbers matter, but it's also how they're interpreted by the writers. How are numbers used against you? How do you use numbers in your statistics, right? Be open to being challenged for your numbers. Be open to being challenged when you're an academic writer. Also, not only your numbers being challenged, but your interpretation of the numbers. That is key, right? And writers almost always have agendas that shape the interpretation. Coming back to this idea of framing. How are numbers framing an argument is key in statistics, okay? When you think of stats, I really like this quote or this example, and I think Lunsford and I think it's Ruskovitz, right? They have really good examples. The bottom of page 67 is one of my favorite examples, because I myself, and I'll be honest with you, I am somebody who would like gun control. I have small kids and I work in a school, right? And that's cool. That's super debatable. I have friends who are big gun, I guess, nuts, or they love guns and they shoot guns. I've shot guns myself, so I'm not, saying that I've never shotgun. But with that being said, I still can understand how this map here, and if you take a look at this map, this is what Michael Bloomberg released, of how that can be manipulated, right? They're looking at all these school shootings, but then in essence, they started looking at this map and saying, well, are accidental firing school shootings? Say, for example, if a young kid took a gun to school and just accidentally shot out of his backpack, nobody got hurt, is that a school shooting? But then also we see Mark Gongluff, right, had his critique on this as well. I guess And if we look at the top of page 67, these two tweets, it's really interesting. He says map critics. So there were people who were like, oh, now you're trying to frame the debate incorrectly because these aren't school shootings. But Mark Gongloff then comes back and states, map critics unhappy, not all shootings equal madmen stalking halls, but gang suicides, accidents are okay. There you go, right? So he's asking a question, just because it is not a traditional school shooting, and this is controversial, right? I guess gang violence is okay. Why are we not looking if why can't we classify any gun firing as a school shooting, right? And then the second tweet, CNN, of 74 shootings, since Sandy Hook, only, and he's using that facetiously and mockingly, only 15 were just like it. What a relief. So he's using humor here, and it's not humor, it's more sarcasm, right, to make his point. And I think that's really key. And when I read this the first time, I was like, wow, I really like this argumentation, because yeah, that's manipulating it. But then I also understand Mark Gongloff's tweets in saying, well, now the people who are map critics want to dispel the notion of that these are traditional school shootings. Okay, that's a whole nother debate. And so we see here arguments over gun violence in schools reached a new peak in 2018 after 17 students and staff members were killed at Marjorie Stoneman High School, right? Leading to a nationwide student walkout on March 14th, which we all know, and massive protests, okay? So it's controversial, it's debatable, right? But you can see, and no matter, like I said, I'm always going to say this, no matter your side on this debate, right? I told you my side. But even with my side, I still can look at this and understand, hey, I can see how facts can be manipulated one way or the other, okay? This is a prime example, and I really like that. I'm not going to get into surveys and polls and testimonies and narratives, because I think it's understandable. Like, you can look on this in yourself, and I really want you to think about when information is presented, okay? But for surveys, for polls, for testimonies, narratives, always return to this idea of being skeptical, questioning authority, questioning what's presented to you, and interpretation. That's key. How are people maybe using stories one way or the other? Just like you saw with the gun debate. People are using that map one way or the other, okay? It is on you as a critical thinker to understand that, and then maybe use that information as you go along here, okay? Let's move down to page 71, using reason and common sense, okay? This idea of syllogisms, okay? I would write that down, make a note of this, it's important. Aristotle's constructed reason, right? This idea, if you don't have hard facts, how then do you present an argument, okay? Aristotle, describes as constructed from reason and common sense. This is where we get the term syllogism, right? And you've heard this if you study philosophy, maybe not, but even when we go along with this, you'll have, this will seem familiar to you, okay? Let's take a look at this at the bottom, 71. All human beings are mortal. Socrates is a human being, therefore Socrates is mortal. Invalid syllogisms, this is where we test it. The conclusion follows logically and technically from the premises that lead up to it. But many, and this is true, have criticized syllogistic reasoning for being limited, and others have poked fun at it, as in the cartoon on page 72. Okay, kind of a funny penguin cartoon, top of 72. Oh, it's backwards, I'll just read it. Penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. Hardy har, laughy laugh. Okay, so logic, another thing that penguins are very good at. So we can see how these are problematic, okay? But sometimes syllogisms are presented in such a way that they are built from fact when they are not, right? This is how you build it. So we want to understand how we wade through syllogisms, okay? They're not as all simple as the Socrates example. But syllogisms are often provided in this way to base logical arguments off of, okay? Let's go right into that penguin cartoon on 72. But we routinely see something like syllogistic reasoning operating in public arguments, particularly when writers take the time to explain key principles, okay? You can consider the step by reasoning by Michael Gerson, uses to explain why exactly was wrong for the IRS. Blah, blah, blah. You can read that on your own, okay? Understanding how he is creating a syllogistic argument. 73 at the top, Gerson's criticism of the IRS actions might be mapped up by the following sequence of statements. Nice little layout for you. Let's see how syllogistically Gerson has presented his argument on 73. Crimes against democracy undermine trust in the system. Treating taxpayers differently because of their political beliefs is a crime against democracy. Therefore, and this is how we build the syllogism, IRS actions that target political groups undermine the American system. Okay. So few writers, of course, think about formal deductive reasoning when they support their claims. Even Aristotle recognized that most people argue perfectly while using informal logic. Okay. To do so, they rely mostly on habits of mind and assumptions that they share with their readers or listeners, as Gerson essentially does in his paragraph. This is tricky, though. Habits of mind and assumptions, if you're building this kind of syllogistic argument, must be commonplace or kind of understood as a generally accepted assumption and habit of mind. Okay, and if that's confusing, I apologize, but that's going to be the crux of it, right? If it's kind of a well reasoned discourse, but like I said, that can be challenged as well. Think about these arguments against gay rights or gay marriage or slavery or segregation, right? So that's really interesting. Okay, and so we'll move ahead here. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, hit me up with a question. That's always cool. But I want to look at 73. Let's define this here, what an enthymeme is, right? In chapter 7, this is later on in the book, we describe a system of informal logic that you may find useful in shaping credible appeals to reason. Okay, the Toulmin argument, that's going to be key. We're going to discuss that pretty specifically, right? Here we briefly examine some ways that people use informal logic in their everyday lives. Once again, we begin with Aristotle, who used the term enthymeme to describe an ordinary kind of sentence that includes both a claim and a reason, but depends on the audience's agreement with an assumption that is left implicit. Okay, define that word if that doesn't make sense to you, right? Implicit just means under the surface, not outward, which is explicit, rather than spelled out. Enthymemes can be very persuasive when most people agree with the assumptions they rest on. The following sentences are all enthymemes, and let's take a look at these. Okay, we better cancel the picnic because it's going to rain. Flat taxes are fair because they treat everyone the same. I'll buy a PC instead of a Mac because it's cheaper. Okay, sometimes enthymemes seem so obvious that readers don't realize that they're drawing inferences when they agree with them. Okay, consider the first example, we better cancel the picnic because it's going to rain. Okay, I want you to build on that. I'm not going to go over that specifically, but you get the sense of what an enthymeme is based on these, hopefully. Okay, if not, we can discuss that further. I'd like to move ahead. We'll wrap up here, last section, I'm in the middle of page 75, providing logical structures for argument. Okay, I want to think about, and we'll zoom through this, and they're pretty understandable, pretty easy to understand. Degree, okay, we measure things in degrees, right? Arguments based on degree are so common that people barely notice them, nor do they pay much attention to how they work because they seem self-evident. Most audience will rarely accept that more of a good thing or less of a bad thing is good, etc. Okay, in her novel, The Fountainhead, and I'm right at the bottom, 75, Ayn Rand asks, if physical slavery is repulsive, how much more repulsive is the concept of servility of the spirit? Okay, no matter how you feel about Ayn Rand, maybe you have never heard of her. Okay, what she's saying here is there's a degree, right? If you think slavery is bad of your body, how about slavery of the mind? Okay, I kind of can see where she's going with that, right? There's a degree there, right? You think about, you think being in jail in America is bad. Imagine being in jail in another country where it's worse, right? That's a degree, right? That's a degree. Hopefully that makes sense. Analogies are important, okay? Analogies are typically defined as what? I'm on the bottom of page 76. Typically complex or extended comparisons explain one idea or concept by comparing it to something else. We do this all the time. Okay, you can read this here about Dave Eggers in 826 Valencia, right? Arguing that we do not value teachers as much as we should. Please read that. Okay, I agree with that, obviously. Okay, so you can read on that on your own, right? Understanding how he is using the analogy there, right? That's a logical structure for argument. Now let's think about this idea of precedent at the top of 77, okay? Wrote here, being on the shoulders of giants, what has come before. Arguments from precedent and arguments of analogy both involve comparisons. That's key. Consider an assertion like this one, which uses a comparison as a precedent. I'm right in the middle here, the bolded part. If motorists in most other states can pump their own gas safely, surely the state of Oregon can trust its own drivers to be as capable. It's time for Oregon to permit self-service gas stations. This is something I didn't really realize until I went to Oregon a few years back, that they do not pump gas. It's illegal for them to pump gas, right? And I was like, oh, that's so trippy to me. You could tease out several inferences from this claim to explain its reasonableness. People in Oregon are as capable as people in other states. I agree with that. I don't know if you do. People with equivalent capabilities can do the same thing. Pumping gas is not hard, and so forth. But you do not have to because most readers get the argument simply because of the way it's put together. Okay, so this stems from a comparison, right? In any case, that argument has begun to have traction. As of January 2018, Oregon began permitting self-service pumps in 15 rural counties, though doing so called forth virulent pushback on social media. So the debate goes on, right? But you can see that there's a precedent, right? People pump gas from how long? I don't know, in California, I mean, a state, literally Washington, California, Nevada, any state, there's precedent here, right? Think about law. Precedent is a good way of establishing, and law is big on precedent. If something has been established, that is a way to make a logical then assertion, right? Logical claim, okay? And I want to end with something here. I think it's an important question at the bottom of 78, right? You encounter additional kinds of logical structures as you create your own argument, and that's what I want to end this on. Is I want you to really think about how you are creating logical structures in your own argument. For this first part, you are going to study, or this first essay specifically, how these logical arguments are being not pushed on you, but kind of given to you, or kind of presented to you. I also don't want us to kind of lose the fact that not only are we studying that, being repetitive, again, that's all good. How then are you going to use these as you move along here? Okay, sounds good. That's it on these three pathos, ethos, logos. Hopefully this is a way more developed from Camille Langston's video, how to use rhetoric to get what you want. Okay, and like I said, I will leave it open for questions. You can leave it in the class discussion, etc. And I will talk to you soon. Have a good one.